The air was heavy with the smell of burned metal and the sound of distant thunder. But this thunder did not come from the sky. It came from the clash of ships in orbit, from weapons tearing through the air, from the screams of the dying. The war had arrived without warning. No one in the border colonies had expected the Zharin Empire to strike. The humans had only settled here a few years ago, thinking they were far from galactic politics. Yet, now the sky above was filled with fire, and the ground shook with every blast. Elias, a human soldier, had been stationed on the colony as a guard. He was trained, but he had never seen real combat. When the first wave of Zharin troops landed, he fought because there was no other choice. His rifle burned through its energy cells faster than he could reload. Around him, friends and strangers fell. The Zharin were tall, powerful, and merciless. Their armor shone with an otherworldly black-blue sheen, and their weapons cut through human defenses with ease. Elias had heard rumors about them, that they were not only conquerors, but collectors. They took more than territory. They took people. In the middle of the chaos, something strange happened. A Zharin commander, taller than the rest, walked into the battlefield without raising her weapon. Her hair was like silver, her skin marked with glowing lines, and her eyes were sharp as blades. Soldiers from both sides hesitated. She walked straight toward Elias, ignoring the shouts and gunfire. Before he could react, she spoke in a voice that was calm yet carried power. "You, human, you will come with me." Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. "Why? Who are you?" Her gaze did not waver. "I am Commander Sira of the Zharin. I claim you." He almost laughed, thinking it was some cruel joke. But when two Zharin warriors stepped forward to flank her, their weapons aimed at his chest, he knew it was real. The battle continued to roar around them, yet in that moment, everything seemed frozen. Elias had a choice: fight and die here, or be taken alive. He chose the latter, but not out of fear. He wanted to know why this alien leader had singled him out. The Zharin ship was unlike anything he had seen. Its walls pulsed with faint light, as if alive, and the air smelled faintly of some sweet, unknown spice. Elias was escorted to a private chamber. Inside, Commander Sira stood waiting. She had removed her helmet, revealing more of her striking features: high cheekbones, intricate markings like flowing rivers across her skin, and eyes that seemed to study more than just his face. "You are mine now," she said simply. "You were chosen. Chosen for what?" Elias asked. She tilted her head, almost amused. "You were gifted to me by order of the High Council, a prize from this war. You will live here, under my protection, until I decide otherwise." He frowned. "I'm not some prize you can just keep." Her expression darkened, but there was no anger, only curiosity. "That is not what your kind usually says. Most fight to earn the right to be kept. Yet you speak of freedom." "I value it," he replied. Days passed. Elias was not treated like a prisoner, but he was not free either. He was given clean quarters, strange food that somehow satisfied his hunger, and clothes made of soft, light material. The Zharin crew watched him with interest, but none dared approach him closely. Sira visited often. She asked questions about human culture, history, and even personal matters. Yet, there was an unspoken tension between them. She never touched him, never crossed certain lines. And though he was grateful for that, he could feel her curiosity growing stronger. One evening, Sira entered his chamber and stood before him. Her silver hair caught the light, making her appear almost unreal. "Human," she said, "is something wrong with me? You keep your distance. You do not come closer. You do not try to bond." Elias hesitated. "You took me from my home. My people are still fighting. I can't just forget that." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice softened. "You are mine by the law of my people. Yet you deny me. I want to understand why. he met her gaze steadily. Because to me, being yours means nothing unless I choose it. She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Then she turned and left without another word. Outside his chamber, Elias could hear the muffled sounds of the ship preparing for another battle. Whatever was happening, it was far from over. And deep down, he knew that whatever bond Sira wanted, it would not come easily, and perhaps it would change them both in ways neither expected. The war was still raging, and he was now at the heart of something far more dangerous than the battlefield. The Zharin ship drifted through the dark void, its engines silent as if the vessel itself was stalking its prey. From the view in his chamber, Elias could see distant flashes of light where battles still raged between human and alien fleets. Every spark was a reminder that his people were still fighting, and he was here, trapped in a place where he did not belong. Commander Sira came to him again the next day. She walked with her usual confidence, her armor glinting under the soft blue lights of the corridor. This time, she dismissed the guards before entering his room. It was just the two of them. You spoke of choice, she began. Your kind values this above all else. But in my culture, gifts are accepted without question. To refuse them is to insult the giver. Elias folded his arms. Maybe in your culture. In mine, a gift is something you can say no to. Her gaze stayed on him for a moment before she stepped closer. Do you know why you were chosen? Not because you fought bravely, though you did. Not because you are strong, though you are. You were chosen because you are different. Elias narrowed his eyes. Different how? She studied him like he was a puzzle. Most humans captured in battle either beg for release or try to prove themselves worthy of a place in our ranks. You have done neither. You wait. You observe. You resist in silence. That is rare. I resist, he said firmly, because I want to go home. Her expression didn't change, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a small sign she had heard him. She turned away, as if the subject was too fragile to push further, and looked out the viewport. Your home is far from here. The war will not end soon. You may not have a home to return to. The weight of her words sank in, but Elias didn't let it show. That doesn't change what I want. For several days after that, she didn't visit. Instead, other Zharin crew members began to approach him. Some asked him strange questions about human food, about why humans smiled, about what it meant to dream. Others simply stared, as if expecting him to act like some kind of pet or trophy. He gave them short answers and kept his distance. When Sira finally returned, her armor was marked with scratches from battle. Her silver hair was tied back, and her usually sharp eyes looked tired. She stepped into his quarters without speaking at first. Elias noticed her movements were slower than before. You're hurt, he said. It is nothing, she replied. But the faint tremor in her arm told another story. For a moment, instinct overcame defiance. Elias reached out, his hand brushing her forearm. The contact was brief, but her eyes widened slightly. You care? She asked. I don't want anyone to die if it can be avoided, he said. Even you. Something shifted in her gaze, softer now, less like a commander and more like a person. You speak as though you do not hate me. I don't, he answered honestly. But that doesn't mean I'm ready to be what you want me to be. She stepped back, but there was a trace of a smile, faint, almost hidden. Then I will wait, but I will learn. And perhaps you will see me differently. From that day on, their interactions began to change. Sira would bring him meals herself, sometimes sitting with him while he ate. She asked questions not just about humans, but about him personally, his family, his past, his fears. Elias noticed she listened carefully to every word, as if each answer was a rare treasure. Yet, she never pressed for the bond she had spoken of before. Instead, she seemed to be building something else, trust. Elias couldn't tell if it was a strategy or something real. One night, alarms blared through the ship. The voice of a Zharin officer echoed over the comms, speaking too quickly for Elias to understand the language. Sira rushed into his room, this time with urgency in her eyes. "We are under attack," she said. "Not by your people." "Another enemy." Elias stood. "What do you need me to do?" Her expression was unreadable for a moment, then she handed him a small device. "Stay close to me. Do not leave my side, no matter what happens." He followed her through the winding corridors, the walls shuddering as distant explosions shook the ship. Zharin warriors ran past, preparing for battle. The blue lights of the corridors shifted to red, bathing everything in a harsh glow. When they reached the command deck, Elias saw the source of the threat: massive dark ships shaped like jagged blades closing in fast. Sira's crew worked in a controlled frenzy, shouting orders and firing defensive weapons. "These are the Vrek," she told him. "They are worse than any human fleet." Elias had never heard of them, but the cold in her voice made it clear. "Enough." He stayed at her side as the deck shuddered again. In the chaos, he realized something. If this battle went badly, he might not survive. And neither might she. The thought unsettled him more than he expected. The command deck shook again as another blast struck the Zharin ship. Elias steadied himself against the wall, his eyes scanning the glowing displays filled with alien symbols. Outside, the jagged black ships of the Vrek moved like predators. In the dark, circling for the kill, Commander Sira stood tall in the center, issuing rapid orders in her language. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of command. The crew moved with discipline, their armored forms darting between stations. Elias could see the strain in their movements. They were fighting to survive. A sudden explosion tore through the left side of the ship, sending a deep vibration through the floor. Sparks rained from a nearby console, and one Zharin officer fell, clutching a wound. Elias's instincts took over. He rushed to the injured alien, dragging them out of the way as another shower of debris fell. Sira's gaze flicked toward him. For a moment, there was something in her eyes that wasn't command or control, it was approval. "You adapt quickly," she said. "I don't like dying," Elias replied. The Vrek ships fired again, their energy blasts cutting through the Zharin shields. The deck lights flickered, and a deep groan echoed from somewhere in the ship's core. Sira ordered a counterstrike, and a volley of bright plasma bolts shot from their cannons, striking one of the Vrek vessels. The alien ship spun, crippled. But the others pressed closer. "They are targeting our engines," Sira muttered. "If they succeed, we will be boarded." Elias glanced at her. "And I'm guessing we don't want that." Her expression darkened. "The Vrek take no prisoners. They feed on the living." That was all he needed to hear. Without thinking, Elias stepped forward. "What can I do to help?" Sira looked at him as if weighing his offer. Finally, she handed him a small alien sidearm, a sleek weapon that hummed softly in his grip. "Stay with me. If they breach the deck, shoot to kill." The fight outside grew more violent. The ship rocked again and again under enemy fire. Then, a shrill alarm blared, different from the others. Sira's eyes sharpened. "They're inside." The doors at the far end of the deck burst open with a spray of molten metal. The Vrek stormed in, tall, insect-like creatures with blade-like limbs and glowing red eyes. Their bodies were covered in jagged black armor, and their movements were unervingly fast. Zharin warriors met them head-on, the clash of weapons and alien cries filling the deck. Elias stayed near Sira, firing the sidearm at the advancing attackers. The weapon's energy bolts cut through the Vrek armor, but it took precise shots to bring them down. One of the creatures lunged for Sira. She met it with a swift strike of her blade, slicing through its chest. Another came for Elias, and he barely managed to fire in time, the blast sending the creature sprawling. His hands shook, but he didn't stop. The fight was brutal. Zharin and Vrek bodies fell on the deck, the air thick with the smell of scorched metal and something far worse. Yet, through it all, Sira moved like a force of nature, her blade flashing, her voice commanding, her presence unshaken. When the last of the Vrek fell, the deck was silent except for the hum of damaged systems. Sira looked around, her breathing steady, and then turned to Elias. "You stayed at my side," she said quietly. "I said I would," he answered. There was a moment between them, unspoken, but heavy with meaning. For the first time, Elias saw something in her eyes that was not about duty or possession. It was something closer to respect. The crew began repairing the damage, dragging away the bodies of both friend and foe. Sira ordered her officers to secure the ship and restore power. When she finally turned back to Elias, her voice was softer. "You fought for my people today. That will not be forgotten." "I fought to survive," he said, though he knew that wasn't the full truth. She studied him for a long moment, then stepped closer. Perhaps survival is where trust begins. Later, when they returned to the quieter halls of the ship, Sira dismissed her guards and walked beside him. The hum of the engines returned, steady and strong. "You spoke before of choice," she said. "Perhaps I am beginning to understand. It is not enough to claim something. It must also be earned." Elias glanced at her. "That's a start." Her lips curved slightly, almost a smile. "Then perhaps human, one day you will choose me. Not because you were given, but because you wish it." He didn't answer, but for the first time since being taken aboard, he didn't feel entirely like a prisoner. Something was changing. In her, in him, and between them. But deep in the quiet corridors of the Zharin ship, Elias also knew one thing. The war outside was far from over, and whatever fragile understanding they had would be tested again. In ways neither of them could yet imagine. The Zharin ship floated in a calmer sector of space, away from the Vrek hunting grounds. Repairs were underway, and the scars from the battle were still fresh. The air inside carried the faint smell of burnt circuitry, and the corridors echoed with the sound of tools and low voices. Elias had been given more freedom to move around, though too. Guards always kept him in sight. He spent his time walking the observation deck, staring at the endless stars. The silence out here was different from the silence on Earth. It was heavier, as if the void itself was watching. Sira found him there one evening. She approached. Without her usual armor, wearing a flowing black and silver uniform that seemed less like battle gear and more like a sign of rank. Her silver hair was loose, falling over her shoulders. "You've healed quickly," she said, glancing at his arm where a shallow cut had already faded. "Humans are tougher than we look," Elias replied. Her gaze lingered on him. "I have seen that, and I have seen something else. When the Vrek boarded, you did not run, you stayed." "I told you I would," he said. She moved closer, the light from the stars casting a pale glow across her features. "You are not like others I have claimed. They submit quickly, hoping for favor. But you are not afraid to face me, even when you refuse me." Elias gave a faint smile. "Maybe because I see more than just the commander. I see the person who risked herself out there." Her eyes softened at that, but only for a moment. "Among my people, such words are rare. Many see only the title, not the one who carries it." The conversation drifted to quieter topics: human music, Zharin traditions, the strange way their languages sometimes shared similar words. Elias learned that Sira had been raised in a warrior caste, trained from childhood to command. She had never known a life without duty. As the days passed, Sira began involving him in more than just personal talks. She invited him to the tactical meetings, allowing him to observe the strategies her people used in battle. The crew was wary of him at first, but after the Vrek attack, their hostility eased. Some even nodded to him in the halls. One night Sira entered his quarters carrying a small sealed container. "This," she said, placing it on the table, "is a ceremonial drink from my world. It is shared only with those we consider significant." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Significant? How? It is not about rank or power. It is about connection," she said simply. They drank from small crystal cups, the liquid glowing faintly blue. It was sweet at first, then burned warmly in his chest. For a moment, the tension between them eased. They sat in silence, the hum of the ship around them, but peace never lasted long in the galaxy. 3 days later, a transmission arrived from the Zharin High Council. The message was brief but clear. Sira was ordered to return to the capital with her gift immediately. Elias's presence was no longer just a personal matter. It was becoming political. When she told him, he caught the faint strain in her voice. "What happens when we get there?" "They will expect you to be presented," she said, "to show that I have accepted what was given, and that you have accepted your place. And if I haven't," her jaw tightened, "then they will take you from me, and you will not like where they put you." The weight of her words settled heavily. He didn't fully trust her yet, but he trusted the danger in her warning. The journey to the Zharin capital was tense. The ship passed through regions patrolled by both allies and enemies, and Elias stayed close to Sira whenever possible. He noticed her watching him more often, as if trying to gauge whether he would stay by her side when the moment came. On the final approach, the view from the observation deck was breathtaking. The capital world was a vast sphere of silver and blue, its surface covered in sprawling cities and glowing towers that reached into the clouds. Giant ships moved in orderly patterns above the atmosphere, like silent guardians. "This is your home?" Elias asked quietly. "Yes," she replied. "And perhaps the place where our fates will be decided." When they landed, the hangar was filled with Zharin soldiers in ceremonial armor. The air was heavy with formality, the kind that made every step feel like it carried the weight of judgment. As they walked side by side, Sira leaned close enough for only him to hear. "No matter what they say, no matter what they ask, stand with me." Elias gave a short nod. "I will." Beyond the hangar doors, the High Council awaited. Their decision could bind him to her forever, or separate them in ways neither could control. The High Council chamber was vast, its ceiling so high Elias could barely see where it ended. Tall silver columns lined the hall, glowing faintly, as if light flowed through them like water. The floor was polished stone that reflected every movement. At the far end sat the council, 7 figures in elaborate robes, each with the same intricate markings on their skin that Sira bore, though older and more defined. The moment Sira entered with Elias at her side, every eye turned toward them. The weight of their gaze was heavy. Elias could feel their judgment before a word was spoken. "Commander Sira," the central figure said, their voice deep and resonant. "You return from war with your gift intact. Present him." Sira stepped forward. "This is Elias, human. Captured during the Battle of Kareth's Reach. He has survived both our trials and the attack of the Vrek. I claim him as mine." Whispers rippled through the chamber. Elias could not understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable: skepticism, curiosity, and perhaps disapproval. One of the counselors leaned forward. "And has he accepted you?" Sira's jaw tightened slightly. "He stands beside me." "By choice." Elias knew it wasn't entirely true, but in this moment, he decided not to correct her. The alternative, as she had warned, could be worse. The counselor's eyes turned to him. "Humans, speak. Do you acknowledge the one who claims you?" He hesitated. The air in the chamber felt sharp, heavy. Then he said, "She has treated me with respect. I will stand with her." The murmurs grew louder. One counselor looked displeased. "You speak as if you are equal." "That is not our way." Elias met their gaze. "Maybe not. But it is mine." A long silence followed. The central figure finally spoke. "Commander Sira, your gift is..." Unusual. You may keep him, but his conduct reflects on you. If he dishonors you, the blame is yours. Sira bowed her head slightly. Understood. They were dismissed, but as they left the chamber, Elias could feel the tension radiating from her. Once they were outside, she exhaled slowly. You spoke boldly. Too boldly. They will watch you now. I've been watched since the day you took me, Elias said. That night, they stayed in Sira's private residence, a towering structure, with sweeping windows overlooking the city below. The capital was alive with light and movement, airships gliding between massive towers, and streets that glowed with colors Elias had never seen before. Sira stood by the window, her back to him. The council's warning was not idle. If they believe you weaken me, they will strip you from my side. And what happens to me then? Elias asked. She turned, her silver hair catching the glow from the city lights. You will become property of the state. You will be studied, traded, or worse. That is why I told you to stand with me. Elias stepped closer. You don't need to convince me anymore. I understand the danger now. Her eyes searched his face. And do you understand what I want? He didn't answer right away. I think you want more than just a possession. But I'm still not sure if it's me you want, or the idea of me. For the first time, Sira looked almost uncertain. Perhaps I do not know either. But I know I will not let them take you. The next morning, their quiet was broken by urgent news. The Vrek had struck again, not at the borders, but deep in Zharin space. Worse, they had taken captives from a nearby colony. One of them, according to intercepted transmissions, was a high-ranking Zharin diplomat. The council ordered Sira to lead the rescue. When Elias heard, he was surprised to see her hesitate. Why the pause? He asked. Because the colony is near your people's territory, she said. If humans are there, it will complicate matters. Or it might make them easier, Elias suggested. She gave him a long look. Would you come with me then? Into a place where both our enemies might be waiting? He thought about it. The answer came easily. Yes, if I can help, I will. Her expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then you will ride with me into war. The next hours were a blur of preparation. The ship was readied, weapons loaded, and coordinates locked in. As Elias stood on the boarding ramp, he looked back once at the sprawling city. It was strange. This alien world had been a cage, but now it almost felt like a place he wanted to protect. When the engines roared to life and the stars stretched into streaks of light, Elias knew one thing for certain. Whatever awaited them in the contested zone, it would decide not only the fate of the mission, but the truth of what he and Sira were becoming. Asterisk. The Zharin warship dropped out of faster-than-light travel into the contested zone. The stars hung cold and sharp around them, but ahead was chaos, wreckage drifting through space, faint beacons from damaged ships, and the massive shadow of a Vrek cruiser holding its position like a predator guarding its kill. Sira stood at the command console, her eyes locked on the enemy vessel. The crew moved with sharp efficiency, but there was no mistaking the tension in the air. Everyone knew what was at stake, not just the diplomat, but the pride of the Zharin fleet. Elias stood beside her, wearing light armor that had been adjusted for his human build. He wasn't part of the crew, but Sira had insisted he stay close to her during the mission. His sidearm rested at his hip, the same one she had given him during the first Vrek attack. They'll expect us to come straight at them, Elias said quietly. They will, Sira replied, so we will not. Her plan was swift and daring. The Zharin ship would split into two strike teams, one to distract the Vrek from the front, the other, led by Sira herself, to infiltrate from the shadows of the wreckage. Elias would be with her. The moment their smaller craft detached from the main vessel, the vastness of space felt even more dangerous. They glided silently through the debris field, keeping the massive Vrek ship in their sights. Elias's pulse quickened, but his focus stayed sharp. The boarding point was a jagged hole torn into the Vrek cruiser's side, likely from a previous battle. They entered without resistance, the corridors dim and stinking of metal and decay. The walls pulsed faintly, as if the ship itself was alive, moving in silence. They navigated the alien halls until they found the holding cells. The Zharin diplomat was there, battered but alive, along with several other captives, including 2 humans. The sight made Elias's stomach tighten. Sira freed the diplomat first, but Elias moved to the humans, checking their condition. "We're getting you out of here," he said. One of them, a young woman, stared at him in disbelief. "You're with them?" "It's complicated," Elias replied. Their escape didn't stay quiet for long. Alarms blared, and the Vrek swarmed through the corridors. Sira moved like a blade in motion, cutting through any who came too close, while Elias covered their flank. The captives followed in a tight group, fear in their eyes. They reached the boarding craft under heavy fire. A Vrek warrior lunged for Sira, knocking her weapon aside. Without thinking, Elias threw himself between them, firing point blank into the creature's chest. It fell, but its strike had caught Elias in the side. He staggered, pain burning through him. Sira's voice cut through the chaos. "Elias." "I'm fine," he managed, though his legs felt weak. She gripped his arm, half dragging him into the craft before sealing the hatch. The ship launched, engines flaring, as the Vrek cruiser faded behind them. Back aboard the Zharin warship, medics moved quickly to treat the captives and tend to Elias's wound. It wasn't fatal, but it would leave a scar. Sira stayed beside him, her silver hair falling forward as she leaned close. "You shielded me," she said softly. "You've done the same for me," he replied. Her eyes searched his face. "When you first came aboard, you would not even stand near me. Now you risk yourself without hesitation." "Why?" He met her gaze without flinching. "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just the one who claimed me. You became someone I wanted to protect." For a long moment, neither spoke. The warship's engines hummed, and the chaos of battle seemed far away. Finally, Sira's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then perhaps, human, you have chosen me after all." When they returned to the capital, the council could not deny Sira's victory. She had saved the diplomat, rescued civilians, and struck a blow against the Vrek. More importantly, the human gift they had given her now stood beside her willingly. In the grand hall, under the watchful eyes of the council, Sira placed a hand lightly on Elias's shoulder. "This is Elias," she said. "Not just my gift, my ally." Elias didn't know what the future held. The war wasn't over. His home was still far away. But he knew this. He was no longer just surviving. He had found a place, and perhaps even a purpose, in the most unlikely of worlds. And for the first time since the war began, he didn't feel like he was someone's possession. He felt like he belonged,